Jeff, long time no see.
Hey, David.
Hello, hello.
Hello, everybody. Hope everyone's doing well.
So I think Laurent was supposed to be the original facilitator and is out on travel this week. So if anyone else wants to step in, otherwise I can always fill in as well.
Those who speak lead. Go for it.
All right, I should have the agenda up. So the doc, you should be able to find this link from the Slack channel. I can put a link of it in the Zoom chat as well. And then if you don't have access to it, there is a dev group that you should join. Let me just get that link. All right, so joining that group, Google group, should fix any permission issues if folks are unable to look at the doc. So feel free to sign in, add your name to the attendee list. I see a lot of you guys are doing that already. And then usually we start off by going through the attendees, and for anyone that might be new, welcome them to introduce themselves, you know, what they're here for, kind of thing. So yeah, it looks like Ian has already added his name. If either of you feel like just a quick introduction, you don't have to, but.
Sure. So I'm here. Jared Heck is also here. Also, we're both from Lockheed Martin. We work for the centralized DevSecOps kind of organization, and we're doing a lot of work with Toto. And we are interested in helping contribute out the GitLab support for Scorecard. So hey, let's show up. Let's see how we can help out with that a little bit. And there's some other stuff we're doing around Hopper and kind of augmenting SBOMs, but specifically, we're really interested in that GitLab support for Scorecard.
That'd be great. That has been on the to-do list forever.
Yeah, it looks like it's predominantly done. There's just kind of cleaning up the MRs a little bit and helping out with the testing and some other things. So yeah, we got some folks who are going to be getting spun up on doing that.
Cool. Well, thank you. Welcome.
I can say hi. I'm Justin. First time here. I work with eBay, and I'm the author of the SBOM Scorecard project, which I'm hoping to talk about a little later.
Cool. Yeah, welcome. I'll go ahead and add that to the agenda like you asked in chat.
It's already
someone already did. Cool. Well, barring any additional introductions, let's start with project updates or individual updates, where these are usually shorter things, just sort of for awareness.
Yeah, no discussion.
Yeah.
Yes, so for All-Star, contributor ladder PR is still open. If you have any comments, take a look at that. And also we've had a few external contributors submit some features, and they've been asking for a release. Most people that run their own instance just build from head. So I haven't been doing releases regularly. So I'm gonna do a release soon because somebody asked for it. And that's it for updates.
All right, thanks, Jeff. I don't think there's any scorecard ones. Could also probably do a release. It's been a while, and we have some bug fixes. All right. moving on to the agenda. I'm going to assume this was also Jeff.
Yes, yeah. So basically I'm asking this group, first of all, so for technical infrastructure, the guidance from the TAC is that working groups are free to use whatever resources they can find or solicit help from member organizations or to request funding from the OpenSSF governing board through the TAC. So I'm looking for neutral infrastructure support for All-Star project. Currently it's about $300 a month. It's not a big bill. And I'm going to ask here for if anybody has anything to donate. Otherwise, I've already talked to the owning working group for the project, which is the Secure and Capable Projects working group, so that we can go ahead and request the TAC for funding. Yeah. So I'll take that as a no.
So I raised my hand. I don't know if we.
Oh, Bob. Yeah, I see. Hi, Bob.
Sorry. Yeah. Hey, Jeff. Yeah, I know Google has been funding it. We're happy to continue funding it. I think, certainly the choices here as now wearing my TAC hat and not necessarily my Google hat.
Yeah.
It's something I think we could take to the LFIT team to understand based on the architecture, whether that's something that they could help support without the need for additional money versus, what that would fundamentally look like versus like keep doing what we're doing and just make sure that again, we have the right access permissions for folks in the community and figuring that model out. I'm wholly supportive of, making sure that we have a neutral and sustainable solution here. So I guess money is one option to it, but there may be other options that might not involve necessary fundraising, even though it's not a huge amount of
yeah, completely agree. So yeah, the request is for neutral infrastructure or funding for that. So either one would work.
So I guess one clarifying question, is there a desire to stop using the current Google infrastructure? If so, what's the timeline around that?
So the current infrastructure, I've been informed, has like stipulations for retaining access to it. And the All-Star app has a private key that has elevated permissions to all the users who have installed it, as well as access to private data from all the users who have installed it. So it's sensitive, and it's something that we have been proclaiming to be operated by the community and the OpenSSF. So I want to continue to uphold that that claim. So I don't know what the timeline is, at least for the current infrastructure, if that's going to disappear at some point. So hopefully I can get something ready as soon as possible.
Got it. So I guess let me just parrot back what I heard.
Yeah.
So your intent is to move off of the Google infrastructure as soon as reasonably possible, or are you gated by? I'm just trying to make sure that we prioritize this aspect of the TAC and LF accordingly. But so your desire is to move off of that as soon as possible.
I don't think that's what he's saying.
No.
Okay. So maybe that's why I'm echoing it back to make sure.
We actually had this conversation earlier because I've been trying to tease out exactly. I think it's been challenging to put this in words. Jeff, so let me jump in and please tell me if I'm wrong, because we just had this conversation. The way I understood it was the problem isn't so much running on the Google infrastructure. The concern was a kind of access that they expressly required that I think Jeff believes is not necessarily the case for a typical user of a cloud service. Jeff, I'm putting words in your mouth. Tell me if I'm wrong. I'm just trying to paraphrase back what I understood, which may not
so the current infrastructure is running, but I've been given a request that it's that the provider has access to the data, which I've denied. So I don't know if that's going to mean that infrastructure is going to be pulled and when.
Okay, and meaning they have admin access to
Right.
control completely the.
Yeah,
Technically,
exactly.
any cloud provider obviously can read whatever they.
Yeah.
Whatever's in
There's
there.
conspiracy
so something
theories.
different here. Yeah, so there's something
This is
different
different.
that I'm trying to tease
Yeah.
out. And Bob, if you don't know this situation better, please. I'm trying to understand it myself.
Yeah, no, myself as well. So that's I think part of the part of the challenge here. I mean, I think again, from my perspective, I just want to make sure that you don't get caught up in a unnecessary fundraising activity if there are shorter term solutions that would be viable that give you what you're looking for, right? So
yeah, if there's, I mean, this is what I'm asking here. If somebody in this group can provide a neutral infrastructure, I'd be happy to take it without going to the TAC. And if that's Google, then that'd be great. It would just need to be without the stipulations that I've been told are required for that.
Okay. Jeff, and my apologies if this is something you don't want in a more public forum.
Oh, no worries.
Is it possible to like copy paste these specific stipulations that you don't that you feel are a problem? And
the specific stipulation is so in Google Cloud, sorry if those that are mostly AWS folks, but in Google Cloud Platform, there's a project, and then there's a administrator permissions on the project, which means you have access to everything. And the stipulation for my current infrastructure is that a Google engineer must be a administrator on the project for me to be able to use it.
okay, and you think a typical GCP instance or another instance on Azure or AWS or other clouds would not typically have that stipulation?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
I think
my
from
apologies.
my perspective, wearing my TAC hat, I think we can certainly open a ticket with OpenSSF ops and explore what options exist within the IT framework. I think if it's owned and managed by the foundation, that's probably the cleanest way, because you may be kicking the can down the road if another company raised their hand and said, "I'll do this," but there's some other restriction associated with it as well. I would go back to left first and foremost.
Yeah, that could happen. So yeah, any request here, or like anybody who provides infrastructure here it would need to be neutral. So yeah, I agree that might be the problem if somebody provides it but then says, oh well, we still need to access it.
Right.
So that would be my recommendation. I mean, I'm happy to support the funding ask to the TAC, but just from a timeline perspective, it may be way overkill for what you need, but again, that may be premature. So
okay.
Yeah. And let me just quickly speak for LF. In general, we don't own computers or infrastructure. We pay various services, cloud providers, and so on to provide that. So it's not like there's an LF set of computers sitting around somewhere in San Francisco that is ready to do the running.
All right, so it sounds like the action item is a ticket on Bob's side.
No, I'll open the issue on the TAC and with the funding request.
Okay. And I think the key is this clarity on exactly what the current problem is. Because my apologies, we just talked about this earlier. I've been trying to come up to speed to understand the problem.
Yeah.
Because clearly any infrastructure, if they're running your instance, they can do whatever they want to whatever they can see from a technical aspect. So it's something specific that I'm just struggling to understand.
All right. Jeff, do you feel like this has been discussed?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right. So moving on, someone from Lockheed Martin want to talk about adding support for GitLab. I know we have some open PR right now. I believe Raghav, who I'm not sure if is in the call, has been working on trying to sort of get that PR across the finish line. But if you want to talk to it, go ahead.
Sure. So yeah, there's 3 of us from Lockheed on the call here. I think Keith Ganger is going to probably be doing a lot of the work, but yeah, we're just kind of curious where to get started. We saw the issues and the PR that's out there, and happy to kind of help get it across the finish line. We're using it with an open source project that we have called Hopper. We're pulling in OpenSSF scorecard data into augmenting SBOMs, which looks like a great topic for Justin. I'd love to hear what you did. So yeah, I think it's something that we're happy to help support, because I think everyone benefits from the added breadth of scorecard data from GitLab.
Absolutely. I'm excited. So I'm ready.
Yeah, it'd be great to get support for both GitLab and, you know, just augmenting, because Scorecard does also support some local repo analysis. So Laurent, one of the maintainers, is working on some structured results and trying to make certain checks more granular and more data-driven. So like instead of just saying, does it pass the license check, sort of break it down into subcomponents. So we've discussed that in some previous meetings, should be available in the minutes, but one thing with those structured results is that it might enhance our ability to do more analysis locally. So between that and enhanced GitLab support, it's looking, or at least it sounds like a lot of impact.
Yeah, sounds good. We'll communicate through the issue and existing PR, and then help however we can to get across that finish line.
This is really just a request back. There was effort early on to try to make the scorecards requirements not be specific to GitHub, but there's always the risk of, you intend to do something, but you didn't quite accomplish it. So I would beg for, if you've got feedback on the criteria, that sort of thing, what's missing, or, rewording to make it more general. I think we'd be very, very interested in hearing it.
David, are those published anywhere where we could take a look at those?
What the scorecards criteria? Yes.
Yeah.
Somebody else want to give the link, because I'm trying to type in the note here real quick, but let's see here. We'd love. Yeah. So give me a moment. I will put in the link once I do that.
I actually think I know what you're referring to now. I was thinking you were talking more in detail technical requirements, but yeah, I think I know.
Yeah, it's that little table and list, and I mean it's that standard thing you link to with scorecards, but it's still a fair question, so I will go look for that.
All right, yeah, Jeremy, I think that's the list.
Yeah, it's the scorecards
and sort of
checks.
Yeah. So with Laurent's structured results, it's sort of being split where under the umbrella of, say, dangerous workflows or token permissions, there might be a GitHub specific check, but nothing that sort of prevents a GitLab specific check as well, all under the umbrella of the token permission check.
Okay. That said, if you see something that there should be a check in GitLab that doesn't make sense for GitHub, I mean, frankly, what I would suggest is maybe there's some more general criteria. You talk about it, and then you implement that as a GitHub check and a GitLab check, if that makes sense. Awesome. Thank you.
All right. So it sounds like that action item is just to have the discussion in the issues, which is what I heard. So on our next item, talking about SBOM scorecard project, Justin?
Yeah. So I wrote this thing called SBOM scorecard. It scores SBOMs. I think having an SBOM is an important part of an open source project and contributes to some of the security. It's a useful input into security organizations. As such, I think a criteria on the scorecard, on your scorecard, should be, hey, do you have an SBOM? And then the second piece is that you can have one and they're pretty useless. And so like you can have a valid SBOM that doesn't list your dependencies, or you can have a valid SBOM that doesn't tell you the version of the dependency that you're using. And so then there's a subsequent thing, which is like, how do we evaluate the quality of those SBOMs that we require? Which is the thing that my project attempts to do. And so 2 parts, suggest people deliver SBOMs, and then second, make sure they're of high quality. And so I'm happy to, I think someone filed an issue about this, and I said I would be happy to support this happening, but it's not entirely clear what that might look like for y'all. And so I am here to have that discussion.
Is this an existing project or a project you're intending to do?
It exists.
Exists. Got a URL?
GitHub.com/SBOM scorecard.
Where are we? Oh, okay. It's in the
You
chat.
drop it in the chat. Yeah.
I'm gonna I'm gonna move it over to our notes because when this call ends, all chats disappear.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I'd be interested in this because this Jared, I work with the Cycling DX working group, industry working group, and so one of the biggest challenges is you get an SBOM out of one of the generated tools, and then it's missing SHAs, it's missing hashes, it doesn't tell you who wrote it or who designed it, it's missing vulnerabilities, it doesn't have any. They're very weak, right? They're very lightweight. So the quality would be really interesting to see. The challenge that I'll dive into this, but understanding, how are you pulling it? Are you pulling it from Raycore? Are you pulling it from Archivist? Or, is it, you got to point at a repo that has all your SBOMs, but I'll check that out later, but full project.
Cool. So you mentioned an issue. I assume the issue was something like add SBOM as a check.
The issue is in your repository. I can dig up the URL, but it's effectively, hey, y'all should use SBOM scorecard as part of your thing. And I didn't file that issue, someone else did, but I'm happy to support that happening.
Have you compared this to the U.S. government's list of minimum viable?
I've not. I suspect they are complementary given the SBOM space, where everyone has their own view of the world and they circulate around the same idea, but are not necessarily ubiquitous.
Okay. Now, here's a weird question for you. Have you considered whether or not they include the dependency trees when you know they've got them but are missing?
The scorecard project does not, SBOM scorecard does not validate that the SBOM you have is correct. It makes sure that the data that is there is useful. And so if you say you depend on Spring, then this thing will say, hey, but like what version of Spring?
Right.
And you didn't say what license Spring was. And your SBOM file is not even syntactically valid. So yeah. Okay. So it does those sorts of things.
Okay. Well, data that is useful and certain kinds of data are present.
Yeah, so this was mainly generated from eBay's use case, which is as generators of software packages that we use internally, and like we're going to feed that into a system, and that system will decide, like, is that software healthy? Do we have, like, can we do regulatory compliance stuff? And we need to know things like, yeah, but what version of Spring is it, so that when Spring 4 has a CDE, we know, oh yes, this is Spring 4, and we can do something about it.
Awesome.
And I think this is not supported yet, but the intent is for there to be support for customized rules to the degree that someone would like to have different opinions about what's required and what sort of things need to exist. So
Yeah, that's a very common theme that Scorecard has sort of been noticing, is that people have very opinionated opinions about Scorecard as well, like which checks they care about. And there should be an issue with CLO monitor or something like that, where, you know, more and more people are just having this sort of like, we want to customize how we, I don't know, care about certain things, but not others. And it'd be interesting to see the overlap there.
yeah, there's probably some scorecard framework that'll exist in 2 years for people making scorecards or to support these sorts of things. But yeah, I think it's a question of, like, building a scorecard is a mechanism by which we can influence the culture in the direction that fits our agenda. And my agenda is that things should have licenses and versions, and when you get a CVE, you should be able to go look at the SBOM and figure out if you're affected. And so that's what's reflected in my tool. In the similar way that I suspect that the agenda of your scorecard is, hey, we should write secure software and try to get better at that. And we'll put policies in place to address it.
Yeah.
To the degree that this is of interest to y'all, what next step do you need from me, or
So usually, just based on the nature of the meeting, I'm trying to look at all the attendees right now. We're missing quite a few maintainers on the, just due to travel and parental leave and stuff like that. So I think the best would be for sort of a discussion on this issue that I added to the notes about adding support for the SBOM scorecard. So Laurent sounds like he's on board. And I think it aligns with what sort of secure best practices would be in terms of software supply chain. So I think next step would be just soliciting comments on this issue and sort of going from there, given that there's some conferences and maintainers missing right now.
Cool. Do you expect that to happen out? Do I need to attend this meeting again in 2 weeks to make that happen, or can it happen? Like, do one of you want to help nudge the relevant people?
Yeah, so I think sort of soliciting for a comment in the Slack is good. I understand that in the issue, though, I'm pretty sure Laurent said, bring this to the meeting, and then people just happened not to be here, sort of thing. But usually someone has an issue, they bring it to the meeting, it didn't immediately get shot down. People either want to discuss it or for time reasons aren't able to, and then sort of discussion flows back to the issue anyway. But yeah, usually.
Go ahead, sorry.
I was going to say, just having it as a talking point in a meeting gets some initial opinions out, where some people say like, yeah, this sounds good, or no, this doesn't sound good. And then sort of opinions get finalized in the issue. What were you going to say, David?
Yeah, I guess, does anybody have any strong reservations given what they've heard so far. Maybe, which is not a very strong straw poll, but hopefully at least gets the juices flowing. I don't. I mean, certainly, I think the idea of encouraging SBOMs is something we're trying to do anyway. So.
Yeah, and I agree in terms of sort of scoring projects on best practices for securing the supply chain. Having an SBOM is obviously up there. So I think there's some discussion to be had. People are discussing about either binary artifact score or whether this is its own check sort of thing. I think there's some discussion there, but in general, any sort of SBOM support in Scorecard, I support. And sort of that format you described, Justin, where it's one thing to have an SBOM and then it's another thing to have a valid SBOM where, there's some debate about what valid is, but that's something that Scorecard checks have gone through before. Like our security policy used to be, does it have a security policy? It's like, yes, but it could have been empty sort of thing. And then the check was augmented to actually check a few things. So it sounds very similar to some of the checks we have now. Or at least some of the discussions we've had now.
Yeah, and by the way, somebody else asked me if that was if this particular NTA document is what I mentioned, and yes, that is exactly what I was referring to. CISA in the U.S.
Okay.
This is a U.S. specific thing, but this list is specific to it's a recommendation from the U.S. That said, I think other people have looked at it and said, yeah, I mean, we can. There's probably more that should be there, but this is at least I would expect these to be there.
Okay, cool.
So I'm looking through. I mean, supplier name sometimes doesn't make as much sense. Although, at least if the supplier is the registry, the package organization, that makes sense. And then component name and version, obviously, yes. Other unique IDs and I think pearls and hashes make sense. How it's dependent. And the author and timestamp, you may not be checking, but I bet those would be easy to check.
Yeah.
It's not a requirement in order to consider this. It's just that was my question. I think this makes some sense. I'm sure what we'll find is that a whole lot of projects don't have SBOMs at all, and some of the SBOMs aren't very good. But that's okay in the sense that that's exactly why you have a scorecard.
Yeah, I can tell you, having trying to find SBOMs in order to test tools like this is surprisingly difficult.
Because they're hard to find or they don't exist?
Both.
Yeah.
In many cases, they don't exist, and in some cases, they're like alongside the artifact, but aren't in any way linked to the source code of the project, or
right.
It's kind of a mix up too.
I think there is a challenge that typically, the better ones, I believe, typically are generated by the build environment, but then it's not necessarily included in the source code. It's, well, where do you put it? It's not in the package that's generated necessarily, and it's not in the source code. These are doable, but we don't have a convention for it.
All right. Well, I see, Justin, that you dropped the link in the chat. And yeah, I'll probably ping some people that weren't in the meeting just to encourage comments. But if anyone has any final discussion on the SBOM scorecard bit, I'll give it a little bit. But otherwise, I think we're going to move on to the docs mini fix-it plans, which, yeah, I assume is going to be Kara.
Yep. Hi, for those of you I don't know, I'm Kara. I've done some work on documentation for both Scorecard, and to a lesser extent All-Star. And I wanted to follow up on something from last week. In the beginning of January, I had said, this documentation is getting mature enough that it's getting out of date and it needs a freshness review, and we need to do a just sort of a read through of everything. And I grabbed a couple people and sat down and we went through all the docs with All-Star and Scorecard to generate some issues. And it was pointed out last week, rightly so, that I probably should have announced that to the group and found out who else was interested in doing so. So I want to apologize for that first off. That my bad. And so I want to put it out there that I was hoping that maybe every 6 months we could discuss perhaps having an hour or two where whoever's interested gets in a call together, reads through, like speed reads through all the documentation. I found this is a good way to just generate real quick list of things of like, yeah, that's out of date. We've been meaning to fix that. And oops, we didn't realize that's not accurate anymore. And then we can prioritize the issues and decide what needs to get fixed. So I just wanted to put that out there and see if there was any interest for, say, a twice yearly review of documentation on the projects.
So just to give some context from last meeting, Stephen Augustus also sort of meshed with the idea of every 6 months. So I think there is support out there in terms of maintaining doc freshness, just so that potential contributors or anyone trying to use it has a time and has an easy time and isn't fighting doc staleness.
So if there's no disagreement on that, how about rather than phrasing it the way I did, if there's no disagreement, I'd like to follow up in, say, summer, around July-ish, or summer for the Northern Hemisphere folks. Maybe this July will be about 6 months from January. We'll have hopefully worked through all the issues that we created in January at that point. And it'll be just time to do this again. So I'll either announce it by email to the group or here, and we can then make a public meeting that anybody can go to participate in this. That sounds good. Cool. Great. That was all I had. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Kara. So with that, we are currently at the end of the agenda. I know sometimes people have additional things to discuss, but if no one else has anything right now, there's always the possibility of ending early and getting some minutes back.
Thank you, everybody.
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right, sounds good. Thanks everyone for joining, especially new contributors or new attendees. Looking forward to discussing these issues.